Welcome to episode 79 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Jan Arado. Jan is a screenwriter from the East Coast who recently used my email and fax blast service to producers. She got some interest from a Canadian producer and had a bunch of questions about the option agreement that he presented to her. So I thought it might be interesting to answer her questions in a podcast episode, as I'm sure there are lots of other people who probably have the same sorts of questions about option agreements. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. Couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 79. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide: how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. I just want to mention two things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters get their scripts into the hands of producers and sell their screenplays. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive a monthly newsletter from screenwriters at Selling Your Screenplay. So far, we have about 100 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. Again, they have expressly said that they want to receive this pitch newsletter. So it's a great way to get your log lines and your pitches into the hands of producers who are looking for material. If you want to learn more about this, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. And secondly, we're now fielding leads from producers for screenwriters. We're doing a lot of outreach to try and bring in requests from producers for screenwriters. Last week, we had more than 10 paid screenwriting leads. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these emailed directly to you several times per week. Here's a couple of real examples from last week's leads. We had a Chinese producer looking for a script doctor to quickly rewrite a project she's working on. This is a quick assignment, and she needs it done in 2 weeks. Pay is based on experience. We have a company looking for what they call flyover scripts, which are scripts specifically about states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Montana, Wyoming, and Iowa. They mentioned the movie Nebraska as an example of what they're looking for. So if you have a script like this is a perfect lead for you to submit to. We had another producer looking for crime, action, thriller scripts for one production company, and that same producer was also looking for low-budget horror scripts for another production company. We had another producer looking for political dramas like Good Night and Good Luck and All the President's Men. I actually see these types of leads from companies quite often, companies looking for political dramas. So there is a market of these types of films. I'm not really all that into politics, so I've never written one, but if you're into politics and you've written a script like this, definitely keep an eye out for these types of leads. Again, I've seen them in our own leads tools, but I've also seen them on Inktip. I've seen them on Craigslist, other places that post screenwriting leads. I have seen these types of leads, and it kind of surprises me. Usually with independent films, you hear that dramas are not something that a lot of these producers are looking for, but for some reason, political dramas over the years, I have definitely seen quite a number of leads for these, including this lead that we had last week. Anyway, this is just a small smattering of the leads from last week. A lot of these leads are still very much active, so if you join SYS Select now, you can still submit to them. And of course, we'll be bringing you more leads in the coming week as well. So if you'd like to sign up, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. Just want to talk quickly about a blog post that I wrote and published last week. It's called How to Become a Screenwriter. And what I did was run through all the podcasts that I've done with screenwriters over about the last 2 years. And I looked at how they broke into the business. And then I created a nice table so you can see the results. I basically just went through all these podcasts, wrote down, okay, this person used networking, this person used query letters, and then I just tallied up the results in a nice little table. So it's a quick way to look at all the podcasts that I've done with screenwriters, see how they broke in, and then below that there's a nice table of all the results, basically just added up, and then you can actually see like what percentage each method worked. I get a lot of questions from screenwriters asking if one method or another actually works. Do contests work? Do query letter work? Do query letters works? This post in just plain black and white, it just tallies the results so you can see exactly which methods work best, and you can compare the different methods to the other methods so you can kind of get a sense of what methods are most common when screenwriters break in. The results were really not all that surprising, but it did, at least in my opinion, prove a couple of things. Query letters can work. There's numerous screenwriters who have used query letters, obviously myself, but there's other writers who came on the podcast who also use this method. Contests, I have had a number of writers use contests. I had one screenwriter use cold calls. So there's really a whole variety of different methods. And again, this article really breaks it down, shows you which methods have worked the most for screenwriters. You know, the 50, I think I've done 56, but roughly 50, 55 screenwriters in the last 2 years I've interviewed, and it just breaks it down. Almost every podcast episode that I do ask the screenwriter, hey, how did you break in? So it's a nice way to kind of get the information, and then, as I said, tally it in this blog post. Also, you can go, I've put links to all the different posts. So if there's a particular method you're interested in, if there's a particular method that you think you would be good at, and I mentioned this in this blog post, you know, if you have sales experience, cold calls, I actually think is one of the most underrated ways of getting your script read. And if you feel confident, if you're good at sales, you've done cold calls before, picking up the phone and calling production companies can really work. And again, we had one writer on the podcast that used this. So there's different methods. I linked to the podcast episodes so you can listen to the old episodes, the ones that really pertain to the particular method that you think might work best for you. And that's really the summation of the article, is that I really feel like the key when you look at something like this, it's not so much, well, this method got this many writers, so this is the method I should use. I really think the method you choose to market yourself and market your screenplays, I think it really is more about you and your personality, your skill set, your talents, what you're good at, and finding a method that fits those skills and talents that you already have. And that's really what I've done. As I mentioned in the article, I mentioned on my podcast quite often, you know, query letters for a variety of reasons have worked well for me. And I don't necessarily think that's the best method for everyone, nor is any of the other methods the best method for everyone. You just got to find what works for you depending on your skills, your talents, what you feel comfortable doing. Anyways, I will link to that article in the show notes, so definitely check it out if you're curious just to kind of get an overview of how most screenwriters are breaking into the business. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I've been talking about my baseball comedy, I think, pretty much since this podcast began. It's this producer that I have the script optioned to. I sent it to him. He didn't actually opt in the script, but I actually sent it to him before I even started the podcast over 2 years ago. It's still a long ways from getting greenlit, but it is slowly moving forward. I mentioned this last week that the producer had a minor league team interested in potentially helping out with the production, which is a big thing because more than half the script, I would say, takes place at a minor league ballpark. So we definitely need the support of a minor league team to get this thing off the ground. Anyway, the producers are flying me and my writing partner, Nathan Ives, co-wrote this script with me. He's flying us out to Delaware this week. We're going to leave on Thursday. We're going to see a game, and then we're going to do some rewrites on the script. We're going to rewrite the script. The specific minor league team is actually a big part of the script. When me and Nathan wrote the script, we kind of just created a fictional minor league team, which worked fine just when we're writing the script on spec. But now that we have an interested producer with a specific team in mind, we're going to go back through. We called it the Bakersfield Bandits because Bakersfield is near here. As best to my knowledge, there is no such thing as the Bakersfield Bandits. But we incorporated some sort of funny little skits into this, the team mascot and stuff. In that, obviously, we're going to go and now we're going to rewrite that, and we're going to rewrite it specifically to this team. One of the pitches to this team is that, hey, this is a big marketing piece for you. This can really help drive attendance and just, notoriety for your team. So we're going to rewrite this script. It's not going to be a huge rewrite in terms of structure or story, but there's some bits that are in there where the guy dresses up as the Bakersfield Bandit. So we'll have to figure out what is the mascot of this team and how can we incorporate that organically into the script. So that's the main thing. We're also making it more family friendly. We had some sort of I would say PG-13 humor in the script. We need to definitely tone this down. I don't know if it has to be a G-rated, but definitely a very clean PG. Obviously, if a baseball team, a minor league baseball team, gets involved with something like this, it really has to be very, very family friendly. So those are really the two things that we're going to be rewriting once we've seen this game. And we're going to talk to the producers as well once we get there. And as I said, I know he has a lot of notes just on the tone and sort of the keeping it family friendly. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Jan Arado. Here is the interview.
Welcome, Jen, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
So you recently did an email and fax blast using my service, and you now have a producer who would like to option the screenplay. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So maybe you can just take – I'm sorry?
I said it's exciting.
Yep, it is. It is very exciting. So maybe you can just take us back a couple of steps and kind of walk us through the process. I think maybe the first thing is maybe you can just briefly tell us what the Logline is so that people kind of understand what kind of script it is that you were pitching through the email and fax blast service.
Okay. The Logline is a young soldier returns home only to face a more lethal enemy, his own wife, whose escalating mental illness propels her to jealousy, rage, and ultimately violence as she fights to claim sole ownership of their infant son.
Perfect. And so, what genre would you say this is in? Is this script in?
That's a good question. There's different elements in it because there's a love story, but it's certainly a serious, and it's also a thriller in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would be more of a, what would you call it, psychological drama or thriller, something like that.
I wonder if are there any movies out there, let's say in the last decade that are sort of similar in, tone and scope to this particular project?
That's a good question. I don't really have anything specifically to compare it with, offhand. I probably could think of something if I had if I thought about it myself. But
okay, maybe you could just tell us a little bit, sort of what sort of budget do you think something like this would have? How big is the cast? What is the scope of the locations and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a film that could be made on a very limited budget because the settings, what I consider the settings, are in Tennessee and some settings in Baltimore. But it could be anywhere. It could film anywhere. Most of the shots are indoors. There's no special effects or no car chases. Mm-hmm. It's a small cast. It's basically 4 people, I guess, is the main. There's 4 that have a pretty, good part of being on screen, and then there's, I think, 2 or 3 other characters besides that, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Minor characters. So it's a pretty contained film.
Okay.
It's a very character-driven film. It's certainly not a plot-driven or.
Yeah. Okay, well that's good to know. I mean that's kind of, it's good to know just in terms of the context of what kind of scripts are succeeding with the blast. And I think what you describe is precisely the type of script that I think does work with the blast, just because there are producers out there that are looking for like these contained drama thrillers, something like this. So I think it's actually an excellent script to use the blast for. So take us back. I mean, today is Monday, March 23rd. Take us back. Do you remember the date we did the blast?
Let me see. I have one right here. I think it was March 10th.
Okay, March 10th. So we're about 2 weeks out now.
Yeah.
And so how many script requests do you think you got overall? Just people saying, hey, please send in the script.
I'd say at least 20.
Okay. And
I'm
so now,
amazed.
Yeah. Okay. No. I think that's great. I think that's a solid number. Definitely people, I don't want everyone to think that they're going to get 20 script requests from this blast, but some people definitely will get that many. As I said, I think your script is, the other thing I do want to mention about your query letter, I think is worth pointing out. And when we were developing your query letter, I mentioned this to you. You do have some background with, I think you said, a son who was, a returning veteran from the Gulf War. And I think that, and you mentioned that in the query letter, and I think that kind of thing, it really adds authenticity, and so I think that could really help also just bring that number of script requests up. Right, and that was your suggestion, and that really was excellent. I think that really did have an impact, because at least 3 or 4 of the producers referenced that when they wrote to me. And said they wouldn't have been interested otherwise. Yeah. So little things like that definitely can add some authenticity. So now tell us just a little bit about this potential deal that you have on the table. The producer has contacted you, and just take us through sort of the whole process. Okay. Well, this is where I'm kind of lost in whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, because this is a very young producer who's in British Columbia. And he is the producer at Foresight Entertainment. And he called me originally and said he'd like to see the script. He has a very thick accent, and I had a really hard time understanding him. And I actually, when he told me to send it to him, I couldn't understand his email address, and I got it all wrong. So I had to call him back, and then I was able to, either it was quiet or I had a better connection, sent him the script. I guess it was about a week ago, 10 days ago. And then he called me yesterday and said that he wanted to option it, and that he was going to the Cannes Film Festival in May, and he wanted to bring it, and he wanted to option it for 6 months, and he'd send me the option agreement, which he did. And it's a 6-month option, and there's no money, up front. And I guess that's kind of the standard operating procedure these days. But the part that's kind of concerns me, first of all, 6 months seems like a really long time when you're not getting anything in return at that point. But, if I'm just sitting on it, that's not helpful either. But then the other part is when he talked about the purchase, and remember this is in Canada, it says he agrees to issue the writer a payment in the sum of 2.5% of the total confirmed budget of the film. And the fee is to be paid in U.S. dollars within 10 business days from exercising the option. And I don't know I don't know if that's a good deal or a bad deal. Okay. So let's break this down into segments. You sent me an email, and that's kind of what got this conversation. And I emailed you back. I said, let's get on a phone call, and I will record it and use it as a podcast episode, because I've other people have optioned stuff, and not just through my email and fax blast service, but people option stuff, and they contact me and have very similar questions. So I thought this would just be interesting. I can create a podcast episode. People can find it. So let's break this down. As I said, you sent me an email, and you had some questions, and I'm just going to run over those questions, and then we'll get to some of these specific things that you just mentioned. One of the things you said in your email was, and I'm quoting you, was, I know optioning doesn't require payment on his part, yet it keeps me from shopping the script around in the meantime. Another thing you said was, I would love to hear your thoughts, or if you think I need legal opinion, please let me know. And there was... and the other thing you said was, I'm just wondering if 6 months is standard or if I need to negotiate. So let's break those 3 questions down. The first one, I know optioning doesn't require payment on his part, yet keeps me from shopping the script around in the meantime. I mean, you understand precisely what the option agreement is. So that's a good sign. I mean, you are completely correct in that, yes, you're basically giving him the exclusive right to purchase the script. So you can't, in good faith, shop it around to other people. But the first part of that is you're saying, I know optioning doesn't require a payment on his part. I mean, nothing is set in stone. And so the fact that he's not offering you anything doesn't necessarily mean that that's standard or anything else. I have been recently, certainly I have optioned some scripts for free as well. And so it's really a judgment call. And I think it's kind of what you said. It's like the script just sitting on your shelf is not at all helpful. So that's sort of the question that now you've got to decide. And there's a couple of ways that I do it, and you can, I will tell you how I kind of come to these decisions, and maybe those can help you. One thing that's definitely different, is between us is I do have some credits, so I'm probably a little bit pickier. I would say if you're new and you have not sold or optioned, especially if you haven't sold anything before, you don't have any actual credits, I think getting a actual credit is so important. So you probably want to be a little looser on some of these criteria that I'm about to mention. So the first thing that I do is I look at the credits that the person has. You can look them up on IMDb. You can see what types of movies they've produced in the last, really their whole career, and you can get some sort of an idea of what are the chances that this guy is actually going to be able to produce my movie, because that's a big thing. It's if it's someone that's fresh out of film school, they seem smart and energetic but have zero credits. That's and giving them a free option is a totally different thing than giving someone who has one, 2, 3, or 4 produced credits that are IMDb that have at least some actors that maybe you've heard of. I mean, that's definitely a different type of a thing, and so you want to look at that and make a decision about this person. Do you think that has this person produced some movies in the past, and do you think that they actually will be able to produce this movie? The other big thing, and that you would want to do at this early stage, and I've always found producers are probably more candid at this stage than they should be, you want to ask him what sort of changes to the script do you think he needs, or do you think you would want to see? And most producers will simply tell you. And again, for where I sit, excuse me, from where I sit, this is a big thing, because if I'm giving someone a free or very inexpensive option, I don't want to do a ton of rewrites on it. It just is not cost effective, and those rewrites can be a very painful process. And as I said, producers at this point, they're usually overly I find that they'll usually just honestly tell you, oh, I want to change this or that or not. So excuse me. So what I typically will try and do is, if they want some changes and I'm giving them a free option, I will try and say, listen, just let's try and get I'll give you a free option, but we're not going to do any rewrites. Take the script to some of the companies that you're going to submit it to get financing, and let's see if you can get some seed money or get some money interested in it, and then pay a little bit for the rewrites down the road. And oftentimes producers are willing to do this. They sort of understand that you're taking somewhat of a chance. And this works out well, because what you just said at the beginning of this was, well, it's not helpful if it just sits on my shelf for 6 months. But what's really not helpful is if you spend 6 months rewriting this thing and then the guy still doesn't end up getting it made. So that's like sitting on your shelf is not worst case scenario. It's not ideal, but it could be worse, where this guy has you do a ton of rewrites. In a lot of cases, the producer's going to come at you with rewrites that you're listening to these changes and you're thinking, these are not even very good ideas. So those are the first two things I would look at. Look at his credits and make some assessment. Does this guy have some credits? And if he does, then that's a real positive. That's like a real bonus. That's a good check mark next to his name. And I would, if someone comes to me, they want a free option. If they've got a bunch of credits and they don't want me to do a bunch of rewrites, it would be very unusual that I would not option it to them. Okay. So as I said, look at that and decide. Now, the second part of your question was, I'm just wondering if 6 months is standard or if I need to negotiate. 6 months is actually a very short amount of time, okay. And that doesn't seem excessive to me. I will typically try and get people to, if they want a free option, I will typically try and get them to agree to a 90-day option. I'll at least sort of, negotiate a little bit and say, well, what about a 90-day free option? And sometimes they'll go for it, sometimes they won't. The one thing that I always want to make clear to a producer is that I will give them the right to extend the option, and I will typically try and tack on like $500 or $1,000, basically so they would get a free 90-day or free 6-month option, and then they can extend it past that point for $500 or $1,000 or really whatever you can negotiate on that amount. And what I've found is, a producer, an independent producer like this, they're not going to waste $500 on your script if they're not really working on it. And after 90 days or 6 months, they're going to have a sense. They're going to have sent it to most of their contacts. They're going to have a sense of if they think this thing for them and for their business model, they're going to have a sense whether this thing has legs or not. And they're not going to just give you because the $500 is not, let's face it, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's usually enough money for these producers that they're not going to want to just throw $500 away. And so it creates a sort of a point for which they've got to make a decision. And again, what I found is at this stage of the game, since he's only asking for 6 months, and I haven't looked at the contract, and you haven't mentioned whether he has some sort of clause to extend it, he probably would be more than open to doing this 6 months and then the $500, or even pushing it down to 90 days and then with an extension of $500. It probably is not a big deal for him, because right now when the project is starting, he's overly optimistic about how long it's going to take to raise the money for this. So that would be one thing to maybe go back and just, try and nicely say, well, what about a 90-day option? And then, you can have a 6-month extension for $500 after the 90 days. And, I think there's a good chance just it won't even faze him, and he'll go for that. And then you only have to tie up this script for 90 days. And in fact, like 90 days is such a short amount of time. It really is such a short, even 6 months in the film business is such a short amount of time. It really doesn't tie you up that much. I mean, let's just say hypothetically you option this script next week to him. And another producer calls you up, 2 or 3 weeks later, and says, oh, I love it, I want to option it. At that point, you would just explain to him, well, listen, I got this 90-day option. You'd write down his name, write down his phone number. Let me give you a call. And at that point, in 2 or 3 weeks, it's not even 90 days. Now you're down to 75 days. So you're like, well, let me give you a call in 75 days and see if this guy re-options the thing for $500. So, if something comes up, if it's an 18-month option or excuse me, again, if it's an 18-month option or something long like that, it's such a long amount of time that if a producer were to call you up and they're interested in it and it's already optioned, in 18 months, they may or may not even be interested in it. But if you tell someone that, hey, yes, it's optioned, but the option expires in 75 days, that's not that much time, and you can probably, rekindle that lead down the road. So again, that would be my angle. I would try and just go back, and if he doesn't want to do it for 90 days, I probably, again, taking in these other considerations, what sort of changes he wants, whether he wants, whether he has some produced credits in the past, taking those things into consideration, I probably, as I said, I wouldn't bulk too much if he insists on the 6 months, but you might as well go back to him and just see if you can cut that down to 90 days, because he might be fine with that. The next part of your email said, I would love to hear your thoughts, or if you think I need a legal opinion, please let me know. So, I mean, this is the part, I'm not a lawyer, so I want to make that absolutely clear to you and anybody listening to this podcast. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't pretend to be. And so anytime you're signing a legal document, it is absolutely, prudent to contact an entertainment attorney and get the opinion of, someone who has, experience with this. And I'm not that person. I'm just casually giving out my advice and kind of trying to tell you what I've done. What the problem is, so the bottom line is, anytime you sign a legal document, yes, you should have a good attorney look it over, obviously. The problem with these, as you're, I'm sure, realizing is, he's not paying you anything for the option, so where is the money to pay the lawyer going to come from? And I mean, to get a entertainment attorney, most of them are going to be $250, $300, $400 an hour. So you're looking at best case scenario, probably $1,000, $1,200 to have someone look at this. What I did early in my career, truthfully, and it's not advisable, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm advising that they do this, because it's not a smart thing to do. And I did run into problems early on. But what I did was I would sign contracts without going to a lawyer, especially early on. I now have an attorney that I work with, so everything goes through him. So, it's like, on the one hand, it's absolutely advisable to go to an attorney, but the practicality of it is, do you want to lose $1,200 optioning this script to this producer? And that's the decision that you've got to make. And I can't make that for you. Obviously, only you can really make that decision yourself. And as I said, I did run into they weren't huge problems, but I did run into some problems where some producers, they put some things in the contract that probably shouldn't have been there. And if I had taken it to an attorney, the attorney would have most likely seen those things and told me about them. So ultimately, you've got to make that decision. I do want to talk about a couple of things. I just jotted down a couple of notes before we got on the call. Some things that can save you money with the attorney's fees. And this is definitely can help you. As I said, the attorney is going to charge you by the hour, whatever it is, whatever his rate is, $300-$400 an hour. So one thing I've definitely seen with these free options is from soup to nuts. Sometimes people will send me a 30-page contract. I signed a free option agreement a couple of weeks ago, and it was literally 2 pages. And
that's what mine is, yeah.
Okay, so if this guy's sending that's outstanding. So if he sends you a 2-page option agreement, that's going to definitely bring those costs of paying a lawyer to look at it way down. Obviously, if a lawyer has to, slog through 30 pages versus, 2 pages, there's going to be just based on his hourly rate. So it sounds like you've already got that, but that's one piece of advice I have for people is insist on, a short option form, less than 5-6 pages, hopefully around 1 or 2 pages that just outlines the main things. The other thing, and this will kind of bring us into another section of this, another thing that I have always done, and I still do this to this day, when a producer wants to option something from me, I will actually negotiate all the major points. And I'll talk about the major points in a minute. And again, this is going to save you money with your attorney. If your attorney has to get on the phone, has to, there's some back and forth, with negotiating. Again, he's charging you by the hour. And what I have found with these smaller independent films, there's not really, like when you're talking about a studio film where there's hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake, the ability to negotiate can have a big impact on your bottom line. What I've found with these independent films, films that are made for less than $1 million, probably even less than $5 million, but films that are smaller independent films, there's not that much money that you're going to be able to negotiate. And so, he's not the $1,000 you pay your lawyer to negotiate this thing for you. Truthfully, he's probably not going to earn it because the negotiation is pretty straightforward. So I just want to run through a couple of things. As I said, I just jotted down. There's 4 main things that go into an option agreement, and there's a bunch of sort of boilerplate stuff that I'm not going to get into, but there's 4 main things. And again, your attorney can make sure that the boilerplate stuff is proper, and he can make sure also that these 4 main things are written in such a way that it actually means what you think it means. And the 4 main things are, the first thing is the length of the option, and you've already said that he wants a 6-month option. I've already talked about that. Try and shorten it down as much as possible. Give him an extension and try and get a little bit of money for the extension. So that's one of the main key things that's going to be in the option agreement. The other main thing is the actual sale price if he exercises the option. And you mentioned to me 2.5% of the production budget. And that, to me, like you telling me that sounds absolutely legitimate, and it sounds like he's not in any way trying to cheat you or take advantage of you in any way. What I've always been able to negotiate is between 2 and 3%. So 2.5% is right in the middle of that. Sometimes I've only been able to get 2%. Sometimes I've been able to get 3%. But 2.5% is a very standard, fair amount that you're going to find. Now, the one thing that I would add to that is you're going to want want to ask him what sort of budget he thinks this film is going to have, so that there is some expectation of 3% of a $10,000 budget is only $300, and you want to know that. And I mentioned that I got myself into some trouble early on with contracts. I signed an option agreement early on in my career where I don't remember whether it was 2 or 2.5 or 3%, but it was some percentage of the budget, but I didn't put in any kind of a floor, and there were some problems with the producer. So at one point he calls me up and says, "Hey, I'm exercising the option, where can I send the $300? And he was literally basically telling me, okay, I'm going to go make this movie for $10,000. Here's your $300 for your screenplay. And that was not really the intent of what we had agreed upon, but there was no floor in there. So again, I find producers at this stage to be fairly candid. And so if you just ask him, what sort of budget do you think you're going to have for this movie? And just to make the math easy, let's say he tells you, okay, we're going to make this movie for $1 million. Well, you can do some quick math. 2.5% of $1 million is $25,000. So what you would want to do is you would want to make sure in this contract there's some sort of a floor, which is basically going to say, you're going to get 2.5% of the production budget, or let's say $20,000, whichever is greater. And so then he can't just buy your script for $300 or $400. There's some expectation of what sort of budget. And again, I've never had a producer, be fazed by this or annoyed by this, because at this point he's legitimately thinks he's going to raise $1 million. And sometimes producers will want to put a ceiling, like they might say, okay, fine, but I want to put a ceiling, so it's going to say you're going to get 2.5% of the production budget or $20,000, whichever is greater, but no more than, let's say, $100,000. He may want to put in a ceiling, and that's totally fine too, because truthfully, producers never raise more money than they think they're going to raise. They always raise less. So I've never had it come close to the ceiling. Okay. It's always closer to the floor. So if he wants to put a ceiling, that's fine. If he doesn't mention a ceiling, just don't mention it. But don't be alarmed if he comes back to you and wants to put some sort of a ceiling. But definitely put in some sort of a floor. And again, he's not going to have a problem with that, because he's trying to make this movie on some. And 2.5% is, some, whatever the budget is, he's not going to have a problem with that. And it sets up the expectation that this movie is going to be made at a certain level. And that's important to do. So the next major thing is the writing credit.
Yes,
it
does not sound that.
Like, say that again?
He did mention that. He
okay.
agrees to grant the writer a writer credit.
Okay, perfect. And that's absolutely correct. You definitely want to make sure that there's something in there that guarantees you a writing credit. And it's customary in the industry. It will say something like, he has the ability to bring on other writers and rewrite the script. And that's just the lay of the land for screenwriters. Right. Is we have to accept the fact that sometimes these people, a lot of times he won't, sometimes he will, but that's just things. But you want to make sure that you are guaranteed a writing credit. Yes, he can bring on other writers. Yes, they may get writing credit, but you are guaranteed a writing credit. And one thing that is, I'm not sure how this would shake out legally, but this would definitely be a question for a lawyer. But I've definitely seen a lot of these boilerplate contracts where they come at you and say, it says writing credit will be determined based on WGA standards. And the fact of the matter is that this and most of the contracts that I've signed in my career, they're not a WGA contract. And I had my lawyer, or I think it might have been my manager, say at one point, he said, that doesn't really work because you're not in the WGA. This isn't a WGA contract. So they're never going to you're never going to go through WGA arbitration when it's not a WGA film, and the producer is not, a WGA signatory producer. So that's just like a little tip. It doesn't sound like that's what he's doing, but for other people, you want to make sure that you get guaranteed writing credit, and you don't necessarily want to have this thing about WGA, typical WGA, writing credits, because it's not really going to apply to you. And again, I don't know how that would shake out legally if they tried to not give you writing credit, because as I said, if it's not a WGA film, the WGA is not going to push you through arbitration. The one last point, and this is one of these points that you could take it or leave it. If he balks, I just wouldn't worry about it, but you can generally negotiate some sort of a back-end payment, especially if you're giving a free option, and generally what you get is called producer's net. So Typically, I've been able to get 5% of the producer's net, and it basically means nothing. You know you're never going to see any of that money or any money at all from that. But on the off chance that this thing is just a mega hit, there is some possibility that you could potentially get some more money. I mean, if it became like a Blair Witch Project or one of these movies that just made, hundreds of millions of dollars, and you had 5% of the producer's net, it would be hard. The producer's net basically says, I'm going to give you 5% of the profits after all my costs are covered, and producers will just make sure that they constantly have more and more costs. But at some point, he may not be able to hide that, and there will be some profits. So I usually like to try and throw that in there again. It's just 5% of the producer's net. I know it's never going to amount to, it never has amounted to any of the scripts I've sold. I've never seen a dime from it, but it's just nice to have in there. Again, I've never had a producer argue about it because they know as well as you know that it's never going to really amount to anything. So that's kind of the basics. So now I'll just open this up. Do you have any specific other questions? I'll be happy to answer. Maybe if you want me to elaborate on anything.
You answered most everything I had. The one other thing I was going to say, I had another email. Now I haven't, gotten back to him yet. And because I wanted to wait until I talk with you and get some ideas for negotiation. But I have gotten another email from another producer wanting to see the script. In fact, I have two. Should I reply to them and tell them, can I send them the script even though I can't option it?
Yeah,
or?
And this is, again, you can do what you want. I'll tell you what I would do. I would just keep sending it out business as usual until the option contract is actually signed. Things can go wrong. You can be in negotiation. Okay. I wouldn't even mention anything to this new producer that wants to read the script. I wouldn't even mention. I'd just say, thank you for responding to my query. I really appreciate you taking the time to read my script. Here it is, and send it off. I mean, the bottom line is the chances are you're never going to hear from that producer again. Right. And the fact of the matter is the script is not optioned. It is available. And if it takes you a week to negotiate this contract and this guy comes, maybe he'll read this, maybe you'll send it to him today, he'll read it tonight and he'll get back to you tomorrow, and maybe he'll have a better offer than this other offer from this Canadian producer. So you just don't know. But once the script is actually optioned, then I would say, I think then you would definitely. I'm trying to think what I do. If someone, once the script is optioned, if someone requests the script and the script is actually optioned at that point, what I will simply do is I will tell them, and I will basically do what I told you earlier on the call. I will say, listen, thanks for getting back for this. I just optioned this script to a producer. It's optioned for 90 days or 75 days or 6 months or whatever the time frame is. If you want to read it, great. If not, I completely understand. But then you just want to tell them up front that the script is optioned, because once it's signed, then it actually is optioned. And I will typically keep those emails in a bin to follow up. If the option goes for 6 months and it doesn't get exercised, then you've got some leads to kind of follow up on. Hey, remember 6 months ago, the script was optioned. I sent it to you. I don't know if you read it, but the option has expired. So if you're still interested in reading it, now's a good time to read it.
It is okay to send them the script, even though it's optioned. Once it's optioned, it's still okay to send it as long as you tell them it's optioned.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. I mean, most of the time they're not going to read it. They're going to just be like, they're not going to waste their time reading it. So, you can send it, but they're not going to read it. That's why I said in 6 months, in 6 months, or whenever the option expires, you would just want to follow up with them and say, hey, did you ever get a chance to read it? The option is now expired and the script is available again. And, you can kind of take it from there. But I don't think any producer, I won't say any, but most producers are not going to read a script that just got optioned. I mean, it's a big, but yeah, why not just send it to them? I mean, I'm trying to think like on Inktip, I'll have a script that's like optioned and I'm talking to the producer and I know that like the producer has basically exhausted everything on the script and there might be like another month, he's exhausted all his contacts. He's not going to make the movie. There's another month on the option, but I basically know it's not going to go anywhere. If I see a lead like on Inktip that really matches what that script is, I'll send the script and I won't even mention the option, because at that point I basically know that I'm going to get it back in a month, and I might as well just start sending it out. I honestly don't know. Again, that would probably be a question for a lawyer. I don't know what the legality of sending the script out. I don't think there's any legality. I mean, you can send a script to anybody for any reason, and if you tell them it's option, you just can't sell the script. I mean, the only thing you're really giving up in the option legally is you're giving him an exclusive right to buy the script. So, this new producer, he can't buy the script legally. He can't buy the script from you, but there's nothing in it that says, I mean, maybe there'll be something in the contract that says you agree not to send the script to anybody, and then obviously you wouldn't send it to anybody. But I've never had a producer put that in there.
Okay. Good to know.
So.
Yeah, I think you've answered everything else that I had, everything I've written down.
Okay, really perfect. I mean, just like, as I said, sort of the stink test, like just, I haven't read the contract, but just the things you've said to me, the 2.5% and the 6 months, it sounds legitimate. I would get on IMDb and I would really just look at his credits.
He doesn't have a lot of credits. He's very young. So I don't know. I don't think probably he's going to find the financing, but on the other hand, maybe he is young and eager and hungry, and maybe that's a good thing. But
yeah. I mean, one of the big things, and I think people miss this a lot of times with these email and fax blasts. I mean, email and fax blast is so direct. It's like it's straight to producers, and people are like, send me the script, and sometimes you get an option out of it. And it's like, I just feel like one of the things people miss from it is the fact that part of what you're doing is building relationships. The fact that he's young and doesn't have a lot of credits, that may not be a big deal. I mean, it's like if he's ambitious, the fact he's actually going to con, I mean, he's going to have to spend some money to get over there. I mean, maybe he's a hardworking guy, and your career can grow with his career, and so building that relationship, and that's one of the that I've found from my own email and fax blast service is that I've really built some pretty good relationships with producers. I mean, I had this one producer over a year ago. I optioned a script to him. It was a free option for 6 months. And I even did a little bit of rewriting for him. We're talking like maybe I spent a couple hours type of thing. Nothing big. But, he had a few credits. I liked him. I met with him. I liked him. And, we built a relationship over the thing. I've optioned another script to him. I've worked on some other treatments with him. There's just some other things. And it's like, he's a hardworking guy. He's ambitious. And so it's like, I know he's going to get some movies produced at some point, and he's going to need a writer to write those movies. And this producer, he may not produce this movie. You may option it to him, but building that relationship and just keeping in touch with him over the next if he's really young, he's got years. That's might be a good thing. Over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And a lot of people, they don't want to hear this. They want to be like, maybe it'll be 10 years. In 10 years, maybe he'll finally be at a place where he's producing movies consistently, and you've had a relationship with him for 10 years, and he makes one of your movies. And people don't want to hear that it may take 10 years, but that's just kind of the reality, is these things do take time. And I hope he makes your movie, in 6 months and you're off to the races. But, maybe a year down the road, he'll be in a better position. Maybe there'll be some other scripts of yours that he likes. Maybe there'll be some other project where he gets the rights to a book or something, and he wants you to adapt it. And he has a little bit of development money, and he pays you to adapt the script. So there's a lot of little things that you can get out of just building a relationship with someone. And that shouldn't be underestimated.
Right.
So.
Okay. I mean, that's the way I like to look at it too, is that he's not an old established producer, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to be at some point in his life when he's 40 years from now. And and I said to my husband, he's young and he liked my screenplay. I mean, that's pretty cool.
And no doubt, I mean, this is a guy, he reads a lot of scripts, so that's definitely some confirmation. I mean, it's not Steven Spielberg, but it's definitely confirmation that someone, he's going to Cannes Film Festival, he has read, lots of scripts, and he chose yours, so that means something for sure. Yeah,
but I think.
So, Well, Jen, I wish you luck. Please do definitely keep in touch. You know, you can come back hopefully in 6 months for an update and tell us your movie is getting made. That'd be so exciting. I'd love to have you back on for that. But just keep in touch because, as I said, these things they grow slowly, and it always goes slower than we would like. But it can definitely start. I mean, everything starts. The longest journey starts with the first step, and sometimes just a free option that might be the first step to a long career.
Well, thank you. And I want to tell everybody who's listening how amazing you've been, how helpful you've been, how supportive you've been. And I highly recommend everything you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody I know who's into working on screenplays or needing some kind of support or some kind of help, all about you. And I really appreciate it.
Perfect. No, I appreciate that. That's very nice to hear. So perfect. So, well, Jan, once again, please do stay in touch, and I wish you luck with this.
Thank you so much, Ashley. You take care.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get high-quality professional evaluations of your screenplays. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script read for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. These are not newbies. These are not fresh college graduates. These are people who have been reading scripts professionally for numerous years. You can find a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analysis on features and television scripts, and we also have a proofreading service, so if you don't want an analysis, but you would just like someone to look over your script and proofread it, we now offer that as well. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Antonio Bogdanovich. She's the daughter of filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich, and she has slowly worked her way up in the ranks to writing and directing her first feature film, which is a crime drama called Phantom Halo. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.